It was a dark and misty night in the city of Lagos. Adebola's small boat rocked gently on the dark waters of the Lagos Lagoon. The lights of the big city twinkled in the distance, but here it was quiet. Only the splash of his paddle and the soft lapping of waves broke the silence. He had been fishing since sunset, but his net was almost empty. Just a few small tilapia, not even enough for tomorrow's market. Adebola frowned. This was not good. How would he pay his rent, or take Yemisi out for suya this weekend like he promised? One more try, he muttered, pulling up his net. He tossed it out again, the rope slipping through his calloused hands. That's when he heard it. A sound like nothing he'd ever heard before. It was singing, but not like any voice he knew. It was high and clear and somehow sad. It made Adebola's skin prickle. He looked around, confused. There were no other boats nearby. The song seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Suddenly, something tugged hard on his net. Adebola almost fell over as his boat tipped to one side. "Ah!" he yelled. "What is this?" He pulled on the net with all his strength. Whatever was caught in it was big and strong. It thrashed and fought as Adebola slowly dragged it closer. In the dim moonlight, he saw something break the surface. For a second, he thought he saw a human face, a woman with long, dark hair. But that was crazy. How could a woman be out here in the deep water? Then he saw the tail, a huge, powerful tail where legs should be, covered in shimmering scales. Adebola let go of the net and fell back. "Impossible," he whispered. The creature looked at him with eyes that glowed in the dark. Then, quick as lightning, it dove back into the water. There was a big splash and then silence. Adebola sat in his boat, shaking. He rubbed his eyes hard, but he knew he hadn't imagined it. There was something in the lagoon, something that shouldn't exist, and somehow he knew this was just the beginning of the trouble. The next morning, Adebola couldn't shake off what he'd seen. As he walked through the busy streets of Lagos, the creature's glowing eyes haunted his thoughts. He made his way to Yemisi's small apartment near the university. She was studying to be a marine biologist, and if anyone would believe him, it would be her. Yemisi opened the door, her braids tied up in a colorful scarf. "Adebola, I thought we were meeting later. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," Adebola said, stepping inside. "Something else." He told her everything. The strange song, the creature in his net, the glowing eyes and fishtail. Yemisi listened without interrupting, her eyes getting wider and wider. When he finished, she shook her head. "Ada, that's impossible. You must have been tired. Maybe you fell asleep in the boat." "I know what I saw, Yemisi," Adebola insisted. "It was real." Before Yemisi could argue more, her phone buzzed. She looked at it and gasped. "Oh no, Adebola, look at this." She showed him a news alert. "Local fisherman missing. Boat found empty in Lagos Lagoon." Adebola felt a chill. "When did this happen?" "Last night," Yemisi read. "They found his boat this morning, but no sign of him." They looked at each other, both thinking the same thing, but afraid to say it out loud. "We need to tell someone," Adebola said. "Who would believe us?" Yemisi asked. "They'll think we're crazy." Just then, there was a loud knock at the door. They both jumped. Yemisi opened it to find her neighbor, Mrs. Okafor, looking worried. "Yemisi, have you seen my son? Emeka didn't come home last night." "No, I haven't," Yemisi said. "Did you call the police?" Mrs. Okafor nodded. "They say he's probably just out with friends, but it's not like him to stay out all night without calling." After Mrs. Okafor left, Yemisi turned to Adebola with fear in her eyes. "2 people missing in one night. This can't be a coincidence." Adebola nodded grimly. "We need to find out what's going on, but where do we start?" Yemisi thought for a moment. "I know someone who might be able to help. There's an old woman who lives near the lagoon. People say she knows all the old stories and legends. Maybe she'll know something about this creature." "It's worth a try," Adebola agreed. "What's her name?" "They call her Mama Iyabo," Yemisi said. "But Adebola, be careful. If what you saw is real, we don't know how dangerous it might be." Adebola took her hand. "We'll be careful, but we have to do something. Who knows how many more people might disappear if we don't." As they left Yemisi's apartment, neither of them noticed the wet footprints leading away from her door. Footprints that seemed human at first, but ended in the shape of fins. Adebola and Yemisi made their way to the outskirts of Lagos, where old wooden houses stood on stilts over the water. The air was thick with the smell of fish and smoke. They found Mama Iyabo's house at the end of a rickety walkway. It was small and crooked, with strange symbols painted on the door. Adebola knocked. At first, there was no answer. Then they heard a scratchy voice. "Who comes to Mama Iyabo?" "Please, we need your help," Yemisi called out. "It's about the lagoon." The door creaked open. An old woman peered out at them. Her face was wrinkled like a dried prune, but her eyes were sharp and bright. "Come in," she said, "but be warned, some knowledge is dangerous." Inside, the little house was full of strange things. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling. Shells and bones were piled on shelves. A big black cat watched them from a corner. Mama Iyabo sat in an old chair and looked at them closely. "Speak," she said. Adebola told her what he had seen in the lagoon. Yemisi added what they knew about the missing people. Mama Iyabo listened, nodding slowly. When they finished, she sighed deeply. "It is as I feared. The old ones are waking." "Old ones?" Yemisi asked. "What do you mean?" Mama Iyabo stood up and took a dusty book from a shelf. Long ago, before the white men came, there were creatures in these waters. Not fish, not human, but something in between. Our people called them the Mami Wata. She opened the book to show them an old drawing. It looked just like what Adebola had seen, a woman with a fishtail. They were powerful and dangerous, Mama Iyabo continued. They could sing songs that would make men follow them into the deep. Some say they ate human flesh to stay young forever. Adebola felt sick. "But why are they coming back now?" Mama Iyabo's face grew dark. "The lagoon is angry. Too much pollution, too much noise. The old spirits are waking up to take revenge." "How do we stop them?" Yemisi asked. "Stop them?" Mama Iyabo laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Child, these are ancient powers. You can't fight them with guns or science." "Then what can we do?" Adebola demanded. "We can't just let people keep disappearing." Mama Iyabo was quiet for a long moment. Then she went to a box and took out a small bottle filled with dark liquid. "This is very old juju," she said. "If you can get close enough to the Mami Wata, throw this on her. It will weaken her magic." Yemisi took the bottle carefully. "Thank you, Mama." But the old woman gripped her arm. "Listen carefully. This is not the end. The Mami Wata is just the beginning. Something bigger is coming, something that could destroy us all." "What do you mean?" Adebola asked, feeling scared. Mama Iyabo's eyes seemed to look far away. "The queen is rising, and when she comes, the waters will run red with blood." As Adebola and Yemisi left, they felt more afraid than ever. They had some answers, but now they faced an enemy more terrible than they had imagined. "What do we do now?" Yemisi asked. Adebola squared his shoulders. "We have to go back to the lagoon. It's the only way to stop this." As night fell over Lagos, they headed towards the water, not knowing the danger that waited for them in the dark depths. The sun was setting as Adebola and Yemisi reached the shore of the Lagos. The usually busy waterfront was eerily quiet. No fishermen were out, no children played in the shallow water. News of the disappearances had spread fast. Adebola's small boat bobbed gently in the water, tied to a wooden post. He untied it, his hands shaking a little. "Are you sure about this?" Yemisi asked, her voice low. She clutched the bottle of juju tightly. Adebola nodded. "We have to try. Ready?" They climbed into the boat. Adebola started to paddle, moving them slowly away from the shore. The city lights grew smaller behind them. As darkness fell, the water turned black. Yemisi shone a flashlight around them, but its beam barely cut through the gloom. "How will we find it?" she whispered. "I don't know," Adebola admitted, "but I have a feeling it will find us." They drifted in silence for what felt like hours. The only sounds were the gentle splash of water against the boat and their own nervous breathing. Suddenly, Yemisi grabbed Adebola's arm. "Listen!" At first, he heard nothing. Then, faintly, he caught it. That same haunting song he'd heard before. It seemed to come from all around them. "It's here," he said. The song grew louder. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Adebola felt a strange urge to jump into the water, to follow the voice wherever it led. "Adebola!" Yemisi's sharp voice snapped him out of it. "Don't listen to it!" He shook his head to clear it. "Thanks. Be ready with that juju." Just then, something hit the bottom of the boat, hard. They both yelled as the boat rocked violently. "There!" Yemisi shouted, pointing. In the beam of her flashlight, they saw a pale face rise from the water. It was beautiful, with high cheekbones and full lips, but the eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and sharp teeth gleamed in its smile. "Hello, little humans," the creature said. Its voice was like music. "Have you come to play with me?" Adebola's heart pounded. He tried to speak, but no words came out. The creature moved closer, its long hair floating on the water. "Don't be afraid. I only want to show you the wonders beneath the waves. Don't you want to see?" Yemisi fumbled with the bottle, trying to open it, but her hands were shaking too much. The mermaid's smile widened. "Oh, what's that? A gift for me?" Quick as lightning, a webbed hand shot out of the water and grabbed Yemisi's wrist. Yemisi screamed. The bottle fell from her hand, rolling across the bottom of the boat. Adebola lunged for it, but at that moment, a powerful tail slammed into the side of the boat. The little craft flipped over, dumping them both into the dark water. The cold shock stole Adebola's breath. He thrashed, trying to find the surface. Where was Yemisi? Where was the creature? Something grabbed his leg, pulling him down. He kicked hard, but the grip was too strong. As he sank deeper, the last thing he saw was Yemisi's flashlight sinking into the depths, its beam growing fainter and fainter until everything went black. Adebola thought he was dead, but slowly he realized he could breathe. He opened his eyes. He was underwater, but everything was clear, not blurry like usual. He was in some kind of huge underwater cave. Strange glowing plants lit up the walls. Fish of all colors swam by. "Adebola!" He turned to see Yemisi swimming towards him. Somehow she could breathe too. "Yemisi, are you okay? What is this place?" Before she could answer, a voice echoed around them. "Welcome to my home, little humans." The mermaid appeared, gliding through the water. Up close, they could see her tail was covered in shimmering green and blue scales. "Why did you bring us here?" Adebola demanded. "What do you want?" The mermaid circled them slowly. "Want? I want what I've always wanted, to save my people." "Your people?" Yemisi asked. The mermaid nodded. "We ruled these waters for thousands of years, but then you humans came. You filled our home with poison. You took all the fish. Now we're dying." Her beautiful face turned angry. "So we woke the queen. She will make things right." Adebola remembered Mama Iyabo's warning. "The queen? Who is she?" The mermaid's eyes glowed brighter. "The most powerful of us all. She sleeps in the deepest part of the ocean, but soon she'll wake up. And when she does, she'll take back what's ours." "But that's crazy," Yemisi said. "You can't just destroy Lagos." "Why not?" the mermaid hissed. "You destroyed our world. Now it's our turn." Suddenly the cave started to shake. Rocks fell from the ceiling. The mermaid looked scared for the first time. "It's happening. The queen is waking up." A deep rumble filled the water. It was so loud, Adebola could feel it in his bones. "We have to get out of here," he shouted, grabbing Yemisi's hand. They started to swim towards what looked like an exit, but the mermaid blocked their way. "You can't leave," she said. "The queen will want to meet you." The rumbling got louder. Cracks appeared in the cave walls. Adebola looked around desperately. Then he saw it, the bottle of juju. It must have sunk down here with them. He dove for it, snatched it up, and threw it at the mermaid. It hit her tail and broke open. The mermaid screamed. Where the liquid touched her, her scales started to melt away. "Go! Go!" Adebola yelled to Yemisi. They swam past the thrashing mermaid and out of the cave. They swam up and up, not knowing if they'd make it in time. Adebola's lungs started to burn. Just when he thought he couldn't hold his breath any longer, they broke the surface. They gasped for air, looking around wildly. They were back in the lagoon. Dawn was breaking over Lagos, but their relief was short-lived. The water around them started to bubble and churn. "Look," Yemisi pointed. Something massive was rising from the depths, something that made the mermaid look tiny in comparison. The queen was awake, and Lagos would never be the same. The water churned and foamed. Adebola and Yemisi clung to a piece of driftwood, watching in horror as something enormous broke the surface. It was like a mermaid, but bigger than a house. Its tail was as long as a road, covered in scales that shimmered like oil on water. Its upper body was that of a woman, but with 6 arms, each ending in sharp claws. Its face might have been beautiful once, but now it was twisted with rage. A crown of coral and bones sat on its head. The queen of the Mami Wata had awakened. She let out a roar that shook the air. All across Lagos, windows shattered. Car alarms went off. People ran out of their homes, screaming. "What do we do?" Yemisi shouted over the noise. Adebola shook his head, lost for words. How could they fight something like this? The queen raised her arms. The water of the lagoon rose with them, forming a massive wave that towered over the city. "She's going to flood Lagos," Yemisi realized. Just then, they heard the puttering of an engine. A small boat was speeding towards them. As it got closer, they saw who was driving it. "Mama Iyabo!" Adebola called out in surprise. The old woman pulled up next to them. "Quick, get in!" she shouted. They scrambled into her boat. Mama Iyabo handed them each a string of cowrie shells. "Put these on. They'll protect you from her magic." "But how do we stop her?" Adebola asked, slipping the shells over his head. Mama Iyabo pointed to a large container in the boat. "With that, it's the strongest juju I could make, but we have to get it inside her mouth." Yemisi looked at the queen, who was now using her power to pull ships out of the harbor and smash them together. "How are we supposed to do that?" Mama Iyabo started the boat, moving towards the queen. "We'll think of something. We have to try." As they got closer, smaller mermaids rose from the water, trying to stop them. But when they touched the cowrie shells, they shrieked and dove away. The queen saw them coming. She swiped at their tiny boat with one massive hand. They barely dodged in time. "We need to distract her," Adebola yelled. An idea hit him. "Yemisi, remember that dolphin call you learned for your marine biology class?" Yemisi nodded, understanding. She took a deep breath and let out a series of clicks and whistles. The queen paused, confused by the sound. It was just enough time for Mama Iyabo to steer the boat right up to her. "Now!" the old woman shouted. Adebola grabbed the container of juju. With all his strength, he hurled it towards the queen's open mouth. For a heart-stopping moment, it looked like it would miss. But then the queen, curious, snapped at it with her huge teeth. The container burst open. The juju splashed all over the queen's face and into her mouth. She let out a terrible scream. Steam rose from her skin where the juju touched. She thrashed wildly, her tail smashing boats and docks. "Look out!" Yemisi cried. The queen's tail was coming right at them. There was no time to get away, but just before it hit, their boat was surrounded by a glowing light. The tail passed right through them as if they were ghosts. Mama Iyabo smiled. "The ancestors protect us," she said. They watched as the queen's thrashing slowed. Her huge body started to dissolve, turning into foam on the waves. The water level slowly went down. As the sun rose fully over Lagos, the queen of the Mami Wata was gone. The lagoon was calm once more. Adebola, Yemisi, and Mama Iyabo looked at each other, hardly believing what had just happened. "Is it over?" Yemisi asked quietly. Mama Iyabo nodded. "For now, but the spirits of the water will always be with us. We must learn to respect them, or this will happen again." As they turned the boat back to shore, where crowds of confused people were gathering, Adebola took Yemisi's hand. "I guess Lagos has more secrets than we thought," he said. Yemisi squeezed his hand. "And we'll be ready for them."